Howdy, my good friends. I hope you're doing well today. Thank you so much for stopping by. Now, I don't know about you, but sometimes I just get tired of all the killing. Now, I named this podcast Murder, Mystery, and Legend for a reason. Seems like murder ruled the roost for a spell around here, and I haven't heard a good mystery or legend for a good bit. That would be because, well, folks tune in, I guess you'd say, for the murder stories than any others that I do. And that would indicate to me that that's what folks want to hear. And I was fooling around on our Facebook group when I ran across a message from Mary Agranikas. Now, I hope I didn't mispronounce that. I am a hillbilly, and sometimes my mouth just don't do things it should. But she made a suggestion about the story that I plumb forgot about. So today we're going to take her up on it and head to Keystone, West Virginia. So come on in and take your shoes off, set a spell while I tell you what happened there and what was done about it. Now, the town of Keystone, West Virginia is in McDowell County, West Virginia, and it was the location of one of the biggest debacles in U.S. banking history. Now, which probably seems odd when you look at the size of Keystone itself. Now, it sits just a bit north of Pocahontas, pretty close to the Virginia state line. That would be a picture from Keystone back in the day. It was founded in 1892 by the Keystone Coal and Coke Company as one of them Appalachian company towns that you hear so much about. Back in 1999, Keystone was a pretty small place with a population of less than 500 folks. Probably one of the last places on earth that you'd expect to find a location of a major bank fall out. If they've been paying real close attention, like most of us don't, because of all kind of folks moving stuff around all the time anyway, the good folks of Keystone might have noticed bank records that the bank stored in an old school building being loaded up on a truck and carted off. Apparently, they'd been declared dead at some point in time because they were being taken out for burial on the property of one Terry Church. Now, Terry Church just happened to be the head of the Keystone Bank that we're talking about today. From what I found, the records were being given the old dirt nap to try to hide the fact that the math that the bank was using just didn't add up. There might have been some of that new math that we hear so much about, where 2 plus 2 equal however you feel instead of the obligatory 4 we were all taught back in the day. Now, it sounds to me like 2 plus 2 had somebody feeling pretty rich. Now, the real reason that the math didn't add up was due to some upside down and backhanded calculating and the flat out sticky fingered loss of millions of dollars by somebody or bodies who had access to just walk in and do the old I'm just checking to see if it's all here kind of thing. You'll see here in a spell that even if that happened, it took and then they'd poked a big fat roll of $100 bills and stuffed it in their pocket every day and walked out the door for say about 45 years, it still wouldn't be anywhere close to how short the bank was on what they're supposed to have. There's your more modern shot of a Keystone, still not up to the most modern, but that's a more modern looking shot of it. Anyway, then came a September 1st, 1999, when a federal agency called the Office of the Comptroller of Currency swooped in like the hawk of death, immediately shut down the National Bank of Keystone and turned it all over to the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. I'm sure the folks at Keystone saw that and wondered just what in the blue blazes was going on, especially since a good many of them had their life savings stuffed up in that very bank. That day, Keystone lost one of its major employers, the financing for other major employers, and a good number of folks lost their life savings, just like that. Now, you see, the Office of the Comptroller of Currency can barge into any bank at any given time and check things out. They've learned through the years how to spot a crooked balance sheet with a quick, effective, and mostly painless audit that they have done most of the time in 1 or 2 days, maybe 3 at most. Then they take all that information back to the office, add it all up, and issue the report. Now, they have the right to do that because they represent the U.S. government, who insures everybody's deposits through the FDIC. Apparently, when they got back and tried to add the Keystone books, it looked like a preschooler tried to do some complicated calculus to figure the flow of water through a screen filter with a yellow crayon. Now, usually the OCC, as they're known, calls ahead to let the bank know they're coming, so they have everything ready. Now, Keystone must have got ready by planting the records in the ground like a seed corn in the springtime and doctoring up a whole new set of books for them to look at. One thing about the OCC folks, they can spot that a mile away and spot it they did. That's why they called their good friends over to the FDIC to come look at the whole mess. Probably as much for comedy relief as serious business. There's about the only picture I could find of the National Bank of Keystone. But the bank had appeared to be one of the top performing banks in the whole U.S. Once the FDIC had combed through the cash and paperwork that went with it, they found the cash to be just a scotch short of what the paperwork was claiming. Scotch in this case meaning a deficit of about $500 million. Now the FDIC figured that the cost they would incur to set the bank straight would be between $750 million and $850 million, which made it one of the 10 most costly bank failures in history. Now, that being said, one would think that everybody was going to be all right and made whole again by the FDIC and all would be good. Well, that wouldn't be the case at all. You see, the FDIC only covered up to $100,000 of any deposit that the bank didn't have, and they weren't in any hurry to issue anything to anybody for any reason yet, because the government don't get in a hurry for anybody or anything else. So if you have your life savings in that bank and you were planning on retiring on it, you were just plain screwed. Folks that had worked their entire lives to have a little bit of, to live on in the latter years of their lives were hung out to dry. People who were living paycheck to paycheck and depositing their earnings every week, and they were just left twisting in the wind too. Imagine trying to get your groceries on payday and your card gets denied, or you pull up to the bank lot, like you do every payday, and find the U.S. government vehicles blocking the entire parking lot, telling you to get lost. They'll explain later. This was just awful, folks. The only thing that might have saved some from the whole mess would have been if they were one of them hardcore mountaineers like my grandpa Akers that just had no trust in a bank at all. He'd survived the Great Depression and wasn't about to let a bank touch his money again as long as he lived. To tell you the truth, we might still find a mason jar or two full of bills if we went out digging at the old home place. I'm sure we probably could. Now, folks started seeing news about what was going on right there in their little town and were pretty much left in shock. Now, then they started hearing the names of the folks that the government was pointing fingers at as the ones with the sticky fingers, or maybe the ones who turned their heads while the one with the sticky fingers went to work. Now, they included Knox McConnell, who had come from Pennsylvania to run the bank back in 1977, but died before anybody could do anything. Terry Church, who took the bank over after Mr. McConnell's death, Billy Cherry, who was Mr. McConnell's companion and just happened to be mayor of Keystone at the time that the whole thing blew up. And of course, there was a whole bushel of bank employees, relatives of the managers, government officials, accountants, and about anybody else the government thought might have been holding their mouths wrong at the time. See, once the feds come up after somebody, they aim to make it count. So they heap on all the charges and hand them out like folks were, like candy on Halloween. That's what I'm trying to say. But J. Knox McConnell, he was born in McKeesport, Pennsylvania in 1927 to J. Knox McConnell Sr. and Marie McConnell. The J. Knox McConnell Sr. was a wholesale candy man and on the board of directors at the People's Union Bank and Trust Company, which meant that J. Knox Jr. had it pretty easy, and he was living it up during the Great Depression, which in my opinion indicates to me that there just might have been something a bit funny going on with the People's Union Bank and Trust Company, what with J. Knox Sr. and family living it up while the whole country was about to starve to death. Now, could be that the apple didn't fall far from the tree when it did fall, and it rolled right into Keystone, West Virginia to carry on the family work. But J. Knox Jr. was so well off that when he was 8 years old, he got to meet boxing legend Billy Conn. You might remember him if you're a boxing fan. Billy was from Pittsburgh and was known as one of the toughest boxers to ever take up the sport at the time. Now, unfortunately for him, he was best known for getting knocked out cold by Joe Louis in the 13th round of their fight in 1941. That meeting between the two of them turned into a lifelong friendship between them. Mr. Kahn was the one who advised young J. Knox Jr. to get into the banking business, since a man in that line of work would be a right smart less chance of winding up punch drunk, as they called it then. Apparently, that advice took, because J. Knox McConnell Jr. attended the Hargrave Military Academy in Virginia. He then spent 10 months in the Army after World War II, so he served right there in the time period between World War II and the Korean War. Then he went to Waynesburg College, where he graduated in 1949 and went straight into banking. His first job was the People's First National Bank of Pittsburgh, where he worked in the credit department. He left there and went on a tour of banking jobs in Oil City and Indiana County. Then he moseyed on back to Pittsburgh in 1958, where he finally got the job that he was looking for. That would be manager of Franklin Federal Bank in Squirrel Hill. He still wasn't exactly where he wanted to be, folks, so come 1960, he opened his own bank in Indiana County. Of course, as with that came some trouble. Seems like it follows a man, don't it? There was a group of folks that just didn't want that to happen, so they took him to court over it. It finally led to the final showdown in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. That's when his old friend Billy Kahn showed up, put together a meeting with Art Rooney. Now, many of you may remember him. He was the founder and the owner of Pittsburgh Steelers for a while, especially during their glory years. It just so happened that Mr. Rooney was friends with a former NFL commissioner named Bert Bell. And it just so happened that Mr. Bell was the brother of Pennsylvania Supreme Court Justice John C. Bell Jr., and that led to the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania ruling in J. Knox McConnell's favor, and that allowed him to open his Kanawha Valley Bank. And he finally sold that bank and worked his way into international banking with the U.S. Department of the Interior, where he ran a development bank in Saipan. Then, after an audit there, where they found excessive travel and poor loan collections among his repertoire of creative bookkeeping, J. Knox left that job and went back home. In my humble opinion, likely because he was given a choice to go or be dragged off the back porch the hard way. But that's where Keystone West Virginia came into play. He came to Keystone in 1977 as Vice President and Chief Executive Officer of the First National Bank of Keystone. Now, you may be wondering why on earth he would go to Keystone to take on a bank that was on the downhill swing, supposedly, because by then it was a slump in Keystone coal production. The bank was founded in 1904, made it through the Great Depression, and was a small community bank with just $17 million in assets in 1977. Now, saying just $17 million, well, I'd take one of them and be on my way, and people wouldn't have to worry about me again. But anyway, $17 million apparently is a pretty low figure for a bank. Now, I don't keep on top of that, so I can't say either way. But most of its business was to local customers. Of course, J. Knox McConnell Jr. was intended to change all that. First thing he did was get two women from his old stomping grounds in Pittsburgh to come on down and help him out. Now, they were Billy Cherry, who was a comptroller at a Pittsburgh apartment building and a sometime girlfriend of his. And she brought along Terry Church, who was a bookkeeper at the same building. Now, Terry Church had managed Knox's books in the United States back when he was in Saipan. Not to mention that Miss Cherry had gone to Saipan with him, hoping maybe he'd marry her. These two were probably well versed in the J. Knox McConnell method of bookkeeping and might well have been able to teach a course in it. They were known about Keystone as Knox's Foxes. It wasn't long before Mr. McConnell worked his way up to bank president. And I think I've got a picture of Knox's Foxes. That would be them there. Now, J. Knox decided that he was just doing business there in Big Dial County anymore. He just wasn't cutting it. Under his watch, the bank needed to grow, which led him to calling on his connections back in Pittsburgh, where he started offering and signing discount mortgages to upper income folks, mainly doctors in that area, which made it start raining money all over his bank. Now, he started doing business all over West Virginia too. Now, he would offer new cars in place of interest on CDs deposited with his bank. That really brought in the customers, and every one of them drove home their brand new, spanking new top of the line, fully loaded Cadillac or Lincoln Continental car. Some picked sports cars like Mustangs or something along those lines, maybe a Dodge Charger or something, or maybe a Dodge Durango that just came out back in. Of course, every bit of the interest that was earned on the deposits went straight to the car dealers to pay for the cars. Now, by then, Jay Knox was up and appointed to the West Virginia Racing and Boxing Commission. He even became good friends with President George H.W. Bush and thought about running for West Virginia governor at one point. In the early 1990s, he came up with yet another big idea that would cause the First National Bank of Keystone to become a big player in the banking business. Back then, the federal government would insure the home improvement loans. They wanted folks to get loans to improve their houses and in order to keep them in good shape. Now, these loans went down as a FHA Title I loan and were good for up to $25,000. Now, Jay Knox started buying these loans hand over fist from lenders all over the country. And then he'd bundle each one of them up together and resell them for profit. That was known as securitization in the banking business, and which is a very thing that caused the housing crash in the Great Recession of 2008. Jay Knox was going at it at a clip that couldn't be kept up with without starting a whole other company to be able to handle the volume of business. So he formed the Keystone Mortgage Corporation to handle that part of the business. Now, Then he hired somebody to run all over the country just to make what they called Title I purchases. And in 1996, the First National Bank of Keystone bought and sold $725 million worth of loans. That was about half of all the securitizations in the United States that year. Of course, folks, that was all on paper. The bank actually needed more deposits to balance the books out properly, and of course, Knox had a plan for that too. He was one of the first bankers to start a web page on the internet to sell CDs with interest rates 2 points above the market rate. And that really made it rain cash. And it made millions of dollars, and they went right into the First National Bank of Keystone money hole. American banker named Keystone Bank as one of the most profitable community banks in America 3 years in a row, all while it needed $1 billion in assets. And that got the attention of the federal banking regulators because the town had less than 500 hard-working Appalachians living there, and the time and $1 billion in assets was just a little bit more than you'd expect. By then, Jay Knox was securitizing debt and consolidation loans, doing about everything. Looks like he was buying it up faster than they could write them. That's when the feds first took action. They got all nervous about how it just kept raining money and made the bank hire an outside accounting firm after they did an audit of the bank's books, and it looked a little bit suspicious. Now, you'd think that would be the time to slow down and make sure everything lined up, wouldn't you? Not Jay Knox McConnell. He just kept right after it. He even told the American banker in March 1997, "We're going to keep it right going." The American Banker, was a newspaper started back in 1835, and it reported all things banking. It kept up with the trendsetters and was very interested in what Jay Knox McConnell was doing in Keystone. Knox told him that he didn't see the bank making any less money in the foreseeable future, and he knew that they were going to do better this year. Now, the wheels started coming off when Knox dropped dead at a racing commission meeting in Morgantown on October 26, 1997. He just dropped right over during the meeting. That passed the whole mess over to Knox's Foxes. Now, Billy Cherry became the bank president, and Terry Church took over the securitizations part. Now, Terry was named executor of Knox's will. All of that happened about the time that the market for securitizations was having some problems. Loans weren't selling for as much as anymore, and the bank was losing money faster than it had been making it. That's when the feds come a-knocking again, and the good old OCC made the suggestion. Now, by suggestion, I mean do this or else, probably is what it means, or that's the way I would take it, coming from the U.S. government. Now, they suggested that the bank demote Miss Cherry and hire a president who knew securitization business a little bit better than she did. That's when Owen Carney was hired on in February 1st of 1998, but he just wasn't cool enough for the bank shareholders, and it didn't take them long to drag him off the back porch and bring on another banker. It was a little bit more cooperative, I guess you might say. Now, while that was going on, another audit was held in the bank records in June. At that point, the bank vice president, Michael Graham, said that he dug up a memo where a federal regulator had made death threats against Knox's foxes. So the bank hired a whole team of armed guards just to protect everybody, of course. Of course, the feds thought they thought, well, I'm going into an armed situation here. So they brought their own armed U.S. Marshals to protect them because they didn't want to be caught with their britches down either while the audit was going on. That, folks, you might call a Mexican standoff, as it used to be called in the old Western I used to watch. Then in August, Vice President Graham, along with 5 others, got together and on the 3rd floor of that old schoolhouse building where the bank stored its documents. They proceeded to box up records, tote them out in a pickup truck. Now the truck headed off back to the mountains to the home of Terry Church, which was located on Burke Mountain. That's where they buried everything in a 10-foot deep trench. By then, with the records that the feds did have, they found $500 million worth of something ain't right here. That's when the Keystone Bank was just shut down. Then the feds paid an unannounced visit to Terry Church's house and raided the property to recover the buried bank documents. Apparently, somebody did notice records being toted off in boxes and buried. Terry Church and Michael Graham were both convicted on obstruction and fraud charges. The rest of Knox's foxes, Billy Cherry, was tried and convicted in bank fraud in 2001. 4 other employees pleaded guilty to their roles in the whole mess. And it ain't over yet. Terry Church was sent to Alderson's Federal Women's Prison after she was convicted. There she met a woman named Norma Faye Knight. Now you might hear her referred to as Laura Tritt too. But after Ms. Knight was released, she beelined it to Miss Church's Burke Mountain Ranch and started selling off property that Miss Church had bought with the spoils of the bank debacle. Now the property had been seized by the feds, which made it a federal crime to do that. So she, out of jail, straight up there, started selling off properties, but the feds found out and put a quietus on Ms. Knight's new enterprise. I couldn't find if she spent a lot of time in jail after that, or if they just maybe turned her as a witness or something. But nonetheless, Terry Church was finally served her time and was released on September 18th, 2015. Now, remember when Knox left his executor in his will? That will had a forged codicil that changed the beneficiary of J. Knox McConnell from his alma mater college in Pennsylvania to Billy Cherry, who ended up getting his entire estate. You just can't make this stuff up, folks. But the only one of the bunch to get away with it all was resting peacefully in Mount Vernon Cemetery in McKeesport, Pennsylvania, probably laughing at the feds from the great beyond. That would be J. Knox McConnell. Apparently, he was ahead of his time in everything. Folks, I hope you got something out of our story today. If you did, please rate and review the podcast, and don't forget to subscribe or follow wherever you're listening, maybe watching on Spotify, YouTube, or Rumble. Please like and share the show around, or use any segment of video or sound you'd like. All I ask is that you mention that it came from Appalachian Murder, Mystery, or Legend podcast, and come on over to Appalachian Murder, Mystery, and Legend podcast group on Facebook, where we talk about everything Appalachian or about anything else you want to bring up. I'll be back real soon with another Appalachian Murder, Mystery, or Legend, and I will see you then.